So this is the second part of the series where I build a dog crate out of old 2x6's. There will only be 3 parts to this video, like I said in the first intro. I also mentioned that this was a Christmas gift for one of my neighbors, so it's no longer my shop. I finished it almost a month ago at this point. So that's why I tried to get the first intro with it in the background, but at this point it's no longer here. It's also absolutely freezing out. It's 27 degrees in my shop. I have a propane heater, but obviously I don't run it at nighttime, so when I get here first thing in the morning, it's usually pretty chilly. For people that watch the channel, I just finished a rather large built-in. I installed it the tail end of last week and the beginning of this week. And I did film while I did that. I sometimes don't, or I don't get great footage, but with this one I did try to do some filming. No guarantees on the quality of that footage, especially since there was a huge picture window in the room. So a lot of the shots might be blown out just from the natural light coming in the window, which I can't really help because I film these videos on an iPad. There's not a lot of settings to deal with that sort of stuff. But after the dog crate build, I will upload that. A lot of people have been asking for it, so I wanted to mention in the intro that that is coming once this series is done. For this series, this video is just going to entail finishing building the basic frame of the crate. The third video will be adding all the hardware and doing all the finishing work on it. So this is what it looks like all together. I'm going to take it apart and I'm going to try and make all of my cuts at once. So for the front side, I'm going to be cutting a curve in the bottom. I'm also going to be cutting a rabbet in the front, as well as a rabbet in the front for slats to hold up the base. In this portion where there's going to be a panel, as well as the back tops, and this one, I'm going to be cutting grooves. And then the mortises for the sides, because these are going to be like square dowels. Now the big thing is that these sides are the same height. So I'm writing and labeling all these parts before I take this apart, not just for the video, for myself, because it's a lot of cuts. Usually what I would do, but time is of the essence with this piece because it had to be done by Christmas, is I would make some of these cuts, reassemble it, mark it again, and make other cuts. But I just didn't have that time. So you could see once it's all in pieces, it could get really confusing. So I always mark back to front as well as left side, right side, and then I put pencil marks where all the cuts should be. This ended up working out perfectly. I had no missed cuts. I missed 2, but that's just because I forgot to label them. You'll see that later in the video. So for the base, I'm making 2 cuts, 2 rabbet cuts on the bottoms because I'm putting slats to hold up the base as well as a flat base. So it's going to be a pretty thick cut in the back. I'm running through the first time. These are not definite depth increments. I think I did 3/4 the first time, and then you could see I'm doing the back as well because the front and the back are going to be the same. Once I put this all together, these cuts will also make more sense. I'm going to move my fence, change the depth of the blade, and then make that cut again. The change in depth was mostly because I was a little nervous about taking away too much material from here. So the back side is 1 depth. You could see it there. And that's just the thickness. I believed I used 1/2 inch on this. So then for the sides, this is the groove I'm talking about, and that is to fit the material I have into that groove. This is basic frame and panel construction, essentially, is what's going on the sides of these. So I need to cut a groove through all of my pieces, and that's basically what this is here. I'm using reclaimed beadboard for this piece, so that is what I have, and it was an odd dimension because it is older lumber. It was a little less than 1/2 inch, so I believe my dado stack is at 5/16 right now. You just see all the pieces that I labeled groove. I'm just sending through, not changing the blade or the depth. You can see the front. This is what I meant by 2 different depths the front had going on there, and then all the groove pieces. So that's basically what I'm working with. The back side, and then the one in the middle will have a groove on the top and the bottom. obviously, to hold both of those beadboard pieces. So then for the sides, I also have to make a groove so that the beadboard has a place to go into the sides. Like I said, basic frame and panel. So I'm just transferring the groove I cut on all of my pieces to marks on the side panels there. And then I could just lay this on the table saw, set the fence because these are thicker, which is why I have to change the fence, line that up, and then cut those grooves as well. So there's the piece. I'm basically just going from mortise to mortise. You can see the pencil mark. When I go lower this leg onto the blade, I'm using some tape on there as reference to go from pencil mark to pencil mark, and I'm just cutting that groove. If it goes a little bit into the mortise, it's not a huge deal. I'm trying to stay a little shy of it, and since this is a circular blade, I'll have to even out it a little bit. But you could see 2 legs are going to go taper side first, and then 2 legs are going to go bottom side first, just to get accurate cuts. You can see that once this refocuses, I go a little bit into the mortise, and the Dado will have a little bit of a lip on it, and I just shave that down with a chisel. But that's the basic groove there. So then this is the front, and I just used a string between 2 nails. I'd already drew my arch to get an arch in the front of this, just a loose string, and that's how I drew my arch. And then I could just cut that out with a jigsaw. So like I said, the front side here, I think I misspoke earlier, the front side here, the panel cut is 1 depth to fit the slats as well as the base. For the back, the reason it's 2 different dimensions is because I have the beadboard in the back. So the beadboard's going to go down into the base. So essentially I was going to cut a groove in the back, but the groove ended up being a rabbit cut because of the beadboard fitting. That might not make any sense, but you'll see when I start putting this together why the front is that 1 slat and the back is that 2-dimension piece. So then I just started doing the math to line up for my little horizontals here, verticals here. The middle one's a little bit thicker. You can see I have that marked out. So I started with the middle, and then I worked my way to either edge. I did the middle, then I found the halfway mark, which is this one, and then I found halfway of those 2, and then just transferred all those marks to the other side. These are a little thinner, just a little bit of a different look. The depth and the thickness for this was based off the fact that these are offcuts from ripping all this stuff down. That's the material I'm using, so that's how I kind of got the thickness and the dimensions for that. Once that was all laid out, I could go through and do my mortises. This isn't necessarily a structural part of the piece, it's decorative, so I decided to do mortises, but they don't have to be super deep. I think these are only about a 1/2 inch deep. Once this is together, it will be plenty strong with these. It's not like it's a railing for stairs or anything like that. So once I had those, I could transfer all of my marks to the rest of my pieces. The fence is already set up on the mortising jig, so you can see I don't have to mark center or anything. I could just go from there and go in between those 2 lines, and then all of these will be identical as well. So like I said, this is the material I'm using to cut all those slats. It's offcuts from ripping everything down. The skinnier ones, I'm just taking one of these pieces and slicing it in half, and then the thicker ones, I'm keeping them the thickness, but then taking a little bit of material off. So that's how that was all decided. You can see this is just taking those, cutting these ones in half. And this was an amazing project in the sense that I had just enough lumber to do this. I used up pretty much all of those joists I had, down to just about a couple strips of wood. It worked out perfectly. So then, like I said, same math. The space I had was 10 5/16, so I added an inch to that because, like I said, my mortises were a 1/2 inch. And then I could just go through and cut all these down with the stop on the radial arm saw. So that's how I got all of my slats. And then same process for cutting these. you can see I did a little couple test cuts, which is why there's a bunch there, but I did once again set up a stop. I lowered the blade till it was just about perfect. You can see I have my whole stack there, and this test cut was to get so that in between the two measurements is 10 and 5/16. I apologize for the camera work. It's hard to do this single-handed, but that's important because that was the space I had. So you want the space that you have for the slats minus the tenon sticking out for the mortises to be exactly 10 and 5/16, which is what I had. So now I could just go through and cut all of these tenons. We'll leave the exact same space in between them. So that's basically what I'm doing. Like I said, these are just curve cuts. There's faster ways to do this. I prefer to do it on the radial arm saw, and then I have all of my slats. So these are all of my cut pieces. The arcs, once I had that first arc, I transferred it to the front side, and then I did the sides in the same way, and then I can dry fit this all together. So there will be some fitting with all of the new pieces, but in general this went together pretty well. You can see now my base has that arch. And then these are the beadboard pieces I'm using for the sides. You can see how it fits in the groove on the edge as well as the groove in the bottom, as well as it will fit in the groove in the top. It will give you nice solid construction, but all of these pieces can move freely within that groove. And at the end I had a little piece to cut so that this fit in there. That's what that looks like, and then the top can go in place. It'll hold everything together quite nicely, and then I could just fit my new vertical slats in as well. Once again, there's a little bit of off-camera fitting that goes into all these pieces, but in general everything fit together pretty nicely the first time around. And then the top can go on, and then this is the finish edge. You can see all of the tape. Marking everything with tape really helps with putting all of these things back together, especially if you have some fitting to do. Sometimes this top piece won't necessarily fit on the left hand side if it's the right hand piece. And I could just go through a bunch of mortises. Like this is always fun, making sure everything lines up so you can hammer it down. So there's my back side, like I was talking about. It has the different depths, and you'll see one's for the base and then one is for the beadboard slats. And this is the part I was just pointing out. This is the one I forgot to cut, was the groove on the back edge. So I had to take it apart and just cut that groove on the back edge. That was the one I forgot, and it was just because I didn't label it in the beginning. But now that this for the back, since the entire back is frame and panel, that groove goes from the base all the way to the top. And then I didn't show it, but these are the pieces I have. This was from an old door my neighbor gave me. It was really nice old yellow pine beadboard, so I just cut it down to the heights I needed. And it's tongue and groove, which is a bonus, so I could just slide those pieces in. So you could kind of see why I had those two separate depths in the back instead of the front, and that is because they're essentially the groove in the back is an open rabbet instead of a groove, because I had already cut for the base. So that's why that back piece looks like that versus the front, which is one solid dimension. And then I could just slide all these into place. Now for the sides, I have the beadboard decorative element facing out. For the back, I have the beadboard element facing into the cage, and that's just because that's what you'll see. You won't see the back side. It will obviously be up against a wall. So I always cheat the decorative beadboard side to where you'll actually see the beadboard. And then once again, dry fit together. I could add my front and then the top, and that is the basic frame. So in order to glue all this together, I sanded all of these pieces just because it's going to be a pain to sand it afterwards. This was really nice lumber, and I sent most of it through the planer, so I started right off the bat at 120, which was nice. I only sanded to 120, and then I could put all this stuff back together. I did round over the edges of all of my vertical tenon pieces that go in there. It just made everything look a little bit nicer, so I did do that beforehand as well. And then the beadboard is pretty old, and like I said, it was part of an outside door, so I did sand that quite well to take the gray weathering off of it. And then you could see I could glue the side panels together with big glue ups like this. This is how I like to do it. I'm gluing the side panels together, getting them all square. I let this sit up for about 2 hours. Like I said, this was about a month ago. It wasn't super cold yet, so the glue set up much faster than it does now. You can see just getting everything together. And like I said, it makes life easier than trying to glue this whole thing together at once. As I go, I really try and take off the glue that comes out, because with all of this dimension and all of these parts, it's a real pain to try and sand them once they're together. I could add all of my beadboard and then my opposite leg. And then I just put some clamps on it and let this set up. So then for the backer, this is going to seem like I'm doing this at the exact time, but I let those sides set up. For the backer, the way I decided to do it this time was I assembled it, I dry fit it together, and then I clamped it so that I can move it easily into place. You can see as I'm doing this, one of the sides has the beadboard facing out and the other has the blank side facing out. So after I film this, I actually have to take it apart and fix that one bottom panel. But I'm just dry fitting it all together in place. And then it's just easier to assemble it to glue together, because at this point I'm gluing together the entire frame so that when I go to put the base in place and go put the doors in place, everything's the way it should be. Sometimes when you dry fit stuff, things will change as you go, so I decided to start gluing everything together. The legs are already set, the side panels are already set. You could see I have this clamped together so it was easy to move, because until this is in one piece, it's kind of floating pretty precariously on what you have there. But then I could, like I said, just put everything in place. I could take that clamp off and then lift this up pretty easily at this point. So then for this, with all these Mortise tendons, this squares up pretty easily, but I do want to check my diagonals to make sure it's square. And then that will be it for the end of this video. Next up will be doing the top, the base, and finishing the front hardware.